A solitary Navy SEAL sat hunched on a snow-dusted bench, his breath a ghost in the frigid Portland air, the very bench where he once shared a silent bond with his K9 partner Valor. A year had passed since the explosion that shattered their world. Everyone urged him to let go. He tried, but some bonds never break. They linger. Then, through the morning fog, an old veteran emerged, a leash held firmly in his hand, followed by a German shepherd with 2 small pups in its wake. The soldier's breath caught the familiar scar on the dog's flank, the soul in its eyes. It wasn't possible, but what unfolded next would hush the entire park, proving to the world that true loyalty never dies. It simply finds its way back home. Before we dive in, let me know where you're joining us from. Drop your city or country in the comments. Dawn broke softly over Portland, its light faint and uncertain, as if the sun was afraid to break the winter's hush. Riverfront Park was shrouded in a blanket of white silence. Benches, pathways, and stark trees wore a thin coat of snow glowing softly beneath the pale morning sky. The nearby river was almost frozen solid, its current murmuring beneath a fragile sheet of ice. A gentle breeze carried the smell of cedar and chilled steel, blending with the far-off chime of church bells. On one of those park benches sat a man in uniform. A uniform that was no longer part of any active service, but one that still carried the weight of his duty. Logan Hayes, 38, once a Navy SEAL, now a silent silhouette in the mist. His uniform, though impeccably clean, held the ghosts of old creases and the faint scent of distant seas. The dark hair at his temples was streaked with gray that the winter sun revealed. His face was sharp and weathered, the kind of face that had seen too much desert sun and absorbed the heavy silence after a battle. A neat beard traced his jaw not for looks but from a quiet surrender to apathy. He remained perfectly still, his elbows resting on his knees, gloved hands held loosely. Underneath his heavy boots, the snow had melted into dark spots, a sign he'd been there for hours. To any casual observer, he probably seemed like a man waiting for someone who would never arrive. But inside his head, the world was a battlefield. He could still hear the ringing of explosions, the crackle of radio static, the urgent bark that once meant, "Find cover now and trust my lead." Valor. The name was still a physical ache deep inside his chest. 1 year ago, a rescue mission had descended into absolute chaos. The mine shaft collapsed. Sand and rock roared down like a monster devouring everything in its path. Logan managed to crawl out with broken ribs and a severe concussion. Valor did not. The official report deemed it an unrecoverable loss. The military sent him a commendation and a folded flag bearing the K9 insignia. But how can you bury a loyalty that lives on inside your head? He claimed he came to the park for the air, to maintain a routine. But in his heart he came here because this was their spot where he trained Valor between tours of duty. A quiet, open field where the dog retrieved sticks with military discipline before resting his head on Logan's boot. This bench had become a silent memorial that only he would ever know. Across the snow-dusted path, a lone figure advanced with measured steps toward the pigeons huddled by the frozen fountain. It was Margaret Ellis. At 70, her back remained straight, though the years had started to gently stoop her shoulders. She was bundled in a long gray wool coat buttoned to her throat and a faded navy blue knit hat. Her face, etched with lines but full of grace, held a stillness born from decades of weathering life's winters, both the ones of season and of soul. Her silver hair curled on the breeze and her eyes, soft, blue and deeply perceptive, missed nothing. In her hands she cradled a paper bag filled with breadcrumbs, scattering them with the deliberate care of a silent, personal ritual. For nearly 20 years, Margaret had made this morning pilgrimage, ever since losing her husband, William Ellis, a veteran of Vietnam. Feeding the birds was her way of talking to him, she'd often say. She held a quiet faith that the pigeons knew her voice, and perhaps through them, heaven, Clear's throat, listened. She first saw the man on the bench 2 weeks ago, and assumed he was just another lost soul adrift in the cold, but there was something about him. Clear's throat. His posture, his profound stillness, the way his gaze never left one spot by the river. It stirred something deep inside her. Today, as snowflakes danced in the air between them, she finally decided to approach, her steps careful on the icy path. "You're out early," she said, her soft voice a mixture of warmth and hesitation. Logan glanced up, jolted from the faraway battlefield of his memory. His eyes were a deep, troubled gray, reflecting both a deep strength and a weary exhaustion. "Mornings are just habit," he replied, his tone even far away. Margaret offered a faint smile. "The military kind of habit?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Was a Navy SEAL long time ago." "Once a soldier, always a soldier," she murmured softly, as she carefully settled onto the far end of the bench. "My husband always said that. He came home, but the war never truly let him go." Logan didn't answer right away. His breath plumed in the air, then disappeared. He wanted to tell her that he knew that the war never leaves. It just changes its form, hiding in small sounds and sudden heavy silences, and the way snow could sometimes mimic smoke. But he only managed to say, "He sounds like a good man." Margaret nodded, her gaze lost in memory. "Maybe too good. He spent his life listening for the ones who never made it back. I think that's why he could never really sleep. Some calls you can never unhear them." Her words resonated deep within Logan. For a flash, he saw himself perfectly reflected in this old woman's grief. A soldier haunted not by his actions, but by the faces of those he'd lost. They sat in a shared silence as pigeons pecked the ground, their tiny feet leaving intricate hieroglyphs on the snow. A faint dog bark echoed from across the park, a bright, distant sound. Logan's shoulders tensed by instinct, his heart hammering once hard. Every bark still held the ghost of Valor's voice. Margaret noticed, following his gaze toward the sound. "You had a dog, didn't you?" she asked gently. He looked at her, truly surprised. "How could you know that?" "The way your shoulders went tight just now," she said simply. "It's how my husband used to be whenever he heard a chopper. Some things, they get etched into your very bones." Logan's jaw clenched. "His name was Valor, K9. We had 6 years together. He pulled me from this fire more times than I ever earned." A silence fell as he stared down at his gloved hands. "We lost him. Last year, a mission overseas. And I should have gone back for him." Margaret's gaze softened with an ache of understanding. "You did everything you could, I'm sure. Sometimes heaven brings them home in ways we don't understand." A faint, humorless laugh escaped Logan. "Well, if he is, he's taking his sweet time." They sat together in the quiet hush of the falling snow, two strangers bound by a grief unspoken. For Margaret, it was the ghost of her husband's war. For Logan, the phantom beat of a loyal heart that once paced beside him. A tiny sparrow then landed near his boot, tilting its head curiously, then fluttering away. Margaret smiled softly. They say an animal's heart never forgets a kindness. Maybe your Valor is out there somewhere remembering you. Logan offered no reply. His gaze drifted to the river where fractured ice floated like shards of broken memory. His mind replayed the last mission, the sudden blast, the dust and the haunting silence after. In his dreams, Valor's bark would echo through all the rubble, but he always woke up before he could reach him. Guilt was the one thing the dream always left behind. The air turned sharp with cold. Margaret stood to go dusting the snow from her coat. "You'll catch your death of cold sitting out here," she offered. "I'm used to the cold," he replied softly. She gave him a long, understanding look. "That's not the kind of cold I mean." With that, she turned and walked away, her steps muffled by the fresh snow, leaving a faint path the wind hurried to erase. Logan watched her disappear. Her words echoed, refusing to fade with her tracks, circling his mind like the gulls crying over the river. As she vanished past the fountain, he leaned back against the cold bench, exhaling a slow, visible sigh. The world around him went quiet again. The snow started to fall heavier, soft flakes blanketing his shoulders, his sleeves, and the worn, stitched badge on his chest. He tilted his face to the sky, watching them land and vanish. Valor. He breathed the name in unconscious whisper. The name escaped his lips on a plume of breath, disappearing into the frigid air as quickly as it was spoken. Across the park, Margaret stopped mid-stride, as if she'd heard a distant call or felt a faint tug on her heart. She looked back over her shoulder at the bench, seeing the solitary man sitting there in the deepening snow, and a thought crossed her mind that maybe some goodbyes aren't meant to be forever. The river sighed, and the snow fell on, and deep beneath the winter's white blanket, something lost was beginning to stir. The next morning dawned pale and utterly still, as though the city itself held its breath. Overnight, a fresh blanket of snow had descended upon Portland, softening every hard line. Trees bowed low beneath its weight, and the river shimmered with a frost that fractured the light like shattered glass. Riverfront Park appeared pristine, a white canvas, the faint memory of yesterday's footprints nearly erased by the night. Logan Hayes found his way back to the very same bench. Cocooned within his heavy navy coat, his breath unfurled in ghostly gray plumes. The bench groaned beneath him, a fragile human sound lost in the immense silence of winter. He swore he wouldn't return, especially not after that strange talk with the old woman. But a pull-part habit, part hope, had drawn him back. His gloved hands ground together, emotion driven by anxiety, not the biting chill. Snow beneath his boots sparkled dimly, a cycle of melting and freezing with his every restless shift. He fought to silence yesterday's words. Maybe your Valor's out there somewhere remembering you. That echo had chased him all the way home, nesting itself between his ribs and his memories. The park was practically deserted that morning, broken only by the soft, rhythmic tap of a cane. On the frozen path, Logan raised his gaze. Through a delicate veil of snowfall, an old man moved with caution down the trail, one hand tightly gripping a wooden cane, the other holding a leather leash. Trotting beside him was a large German shepherd, its fur a deep mix of black and warm, tan-heavy and slightly untamed. Two tiny pups followed right behind, tumbling through the snow, their clumsy paws making a mess of prints. It was such a simple, ordinary sight, but something inside Logan locked him in place. The way the adult dog stood, the slope of its shoulders, even the faint tilt of its head. He knew that form, that distinctive gait. On the dog's right side, a pale scar marked the fur just above its flank, a crescent of scarred skin that perfectly matched the one he'd traced 1,000 times since the explosion. His heart hammered against his ribs. The old man whose name Logan would soon learn was Frank Dawson. He was around 70, tall, but stooped with age. His movement so deliberate he seemed to measure each step before he took it. His face was a road map of deep lines etched into his cheeks and brow, the kind of weathering that tells a story far beyond just age, but of long years spent under harsh skies. A short gray beard outlined his weathered jaw, and his pale blue eyes held a thoughtful calm, the quiet certainty of a man who had already faced the world's worst and endured. He wore a heavy brown coat patched at the elbows, and wool gloves that were missing their fingertips, and a cap pulled low to fight the cold. He whistled softly, his voice a gravelly rasp shaped by time and cigarettes. The German shepherd stayed close its walk, full of quiet confidence, as the pups darted and tripped between his legs, yapping at snowflakes as if they were chasing butterflies. Logan just watched, his breath caught in his throat. For a heartbeat, the dog paused, sniffing the air, its ears up as its gaze swung right to the bench where Logan sat. Across the expanse of white, their eyes locked. A jolt went through Logan's chest, a flood of warmth, of shock, of pure disbelief. The dog blinked once, its head canting in faint recognition, before turning back to the old man. Frank's dry, steady voice cut through the air. "Come on now, buddy. We haven't got all day." The name was lost to the wind, just a muffled sound. Logan strained forward, desperate to catch the name, his heart beginning to race. The puppies yapped at the snow, and Frank let out a quiet laugh, a cracked sound, but genuine. the sound of a man who had long ago learned to find his joy in the quietest of places. Just beyond their sight, another witness watched the scene unfold. Her name was Lisa Cooper, a woman in her mid-20s, huddled near a bench across the park, a camera a permanent extension of her gaze. She was a freelance photographer for Portland Life, a local paper dedicated to the city's soul, its human interest stories, and hidden quiet corners. Lisa's face was sharp and full of life, framed by wisps of auburn hair escaping her wool beanie. The winter had left her skin pale, her cheeks a soft pink from the biting cold, and her gray-green eyes held a restless energy, a constant search for a moment worth preserving. Lisa's assignment was the snowfall, a simple winter feature. But the tableau of the man, his dogs, and the distant soldier ignited a storyteller's instinct she couldn't ignore. She refocused her lens, the camera's mechanical click a sharp crack in the winter's hush. Through the viewfinder, she framed the instant Logan lifted from the bench, his body taut with tension, his gaze locked on the older gentleman. A haunting quality filled the frame, a silent, unspoken understanding passing between two strangers. She couldn't decipher its meaning, but she knew this was what her editor called truth without words. Meanwhile, Logan's breathing grew ragged. He was on his feet now, his boots grinding against the fresh snow. He hadn't intended to move, but his feet carried him forward. The distance separating them felt both infinite and impossibly small. He saw the dog freeze once more, tail low, ears twitching. That scar. My God, that scar. It was unmistakable. Frank turned just slightly, sensing the eyes upon him from the bench. He offered a polite nod, the kind reserved for strangers lost in their own world, before his attention returned to his dogs. "Friendly one, aren't you?" he murmured to the shepherd, stroking the thick fur on its neck. But the shepherd's gaze was fixed again on Logan. The puppies yapped, bounding forward a few steps before tumbling into a heap in the snow. One rolled onto its back, whining playfully, its dark fur dusted white. Frank chuckled, kneeling to gently right the clumsy pup. "Easy now, little one," he said softly. As he stood, he saw the shepherd was still beside him, a statue, its unwavering gaze locked on the man by the bench. Lisa, on her feet, now captured another frame just as Logan whispered a name. Valor. The name drifted on the cold air like a prayer, faint, yet absolutely certain. The German shepherd froze instantly, its entire body going rigid, tail dropping as its head snapped towards the sound. An absolute stillness fell over the park, a profound hush that seemed to quiet the river itself. Logan's lips parted, his voice trembling as he spoke the name again, softer now, but brimming with a raw, undeniable ache. Valor. The dog took one hesitant step, then another. Its eyes widened in dawning recognition, and in that instant the years melted away. The dust, the chaos, the suffocating darkness, all of it vanished. Only a pure, powerful recognition remained. Frank looked from the dog to the man, bewildered. "You all right, boy?" But the dog paid him no mind, its ears now fully alert, every muscle coiled and ready. The pups whimpered, pressing against their father's legs. Lisa slowly lowered her camera, her own heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea what she was witnessing, only that this moment was real and fragile. A truth so raw it could never be faked. The snow kept falling, a light, endless curtain. Logan dared a hesitant step forward, his voice cracking as he whispered again, "Valor, it's me." The dog's tail gave one single uncertain wag, then a bark, a deep familiar sound that shattered the very air around them. Logan froze, his heart hammering against his ribs until it ached. Frank spun toward him in surprise, his expression slowly shifting from pure confusion to something that bordered on understanding. The shepherd stared for a long, heavy moment, then lowered his head just slightly, a soft whine escaping his throat. Logan felt the sharp sting of tears in his eyes. His voice was just a whisper on the falling snow. "It can't be." But it is. The world itself seemed to hold its breath. The snow fell on slow and quiet, like ash from a long-forgotten fire. The air was thick with silence, that fragile space between disbelief and recognition. Logan Hayes stood motionless in the heart of Riverfront Park, his boots sinking slightly into the white crust beneath him. The big German shepherd had stopped just a few feet away. His amber eyes locked on Logan's as if searching through 1,000 memories. The two puppies pressed close against their father's legs, their small tails sweeping back and forth with uncertainty. The old man on the leash, Frank Dawson, watched in confusion, his breath a white cloud in the cold air. Logan took one slow step forward, his voice trembling. "Sir, may I?" He gestured softly toward the dog. His throat felt constricted as if the words were scraped raw coming out. Frank hesitated for a moment, his brow furrowing under the brim of his wool cap. "He's friendly, but be careful," he said, his tone a mix of warning and curiosity. "He doesn't usually take to strangers this fast." "I know," Logan whispered, his eyes never leaving the dog. "He never did?" Frank blinked, confused by the words, but nodded slowly. "All right, son, go ahead." Logan lowered himself to his knees, the cold seeping through his jeans as he extended one gloved hand. The dog stood still, watching him with intensity. His tail was low, not tense. Then, with a cautious sniff, he took a step closer. Logan pulled off his glove, ignoring the bitter sting of the cold, and reached out until his bare fingers touched the thick fur beneath the dog's jaw. The instant his skin met that familiar warmth, something inside him shattered. His hand trembled, gliding gently along the animal's neck, until his fingertips grazed the edge of a worn leather collar. The collar was old, worn smooth by years, and whether its metal buckle scratched and dull. But when Logan gently lifted the small flap, he saw it. A faint engraving half hidden by dirt and age. VLR 29. His breath hitched in his throat, his vision blurring with tears he couldn't stop. "Oh God," he whispered. "It's him, it's Valor." Frank leaned in, squinting at the tag. "You know this dog?" Logan could only nod, the words caught in his throat. His hand stayed on the collar, his thumb tracing the letters again and again, as if he feared they might simply disappear. Finally, in a raw, unsteady voice, he said, "He was mine, my canine partner." Afghanistan, 2017. Trapped on a rescue op. There was an explosion, and I thought he was gone. They told me they couldn't recover him. The old man's expression shifted from confusion to stark disbelief, finally settling into something of profound awe. "Well, I'll be," he murmured. He knelt beside Logan, his knees giving a soft crack. "I found him up near Spokane about a year ago now. He was abandoned, hurt pretty bad. I took him in, patched him up. Had no idea he was military. Just figured he belonged to someone who had to give him up." Logan's fingers combed through the dog's thick fur, rediscovering the faint, familiar line of a scar near his flank. He remembered it in a flash. The wound from their last mission where Valor had shielded him from incoming shrapnel. "He saved my life," Logan voiced quietly. "More than once." Frank studied him for a long, heavy moment. The old man's sharp, pale blue eyes softened with a deep understanding. "Seems like he wasn't done saving people," he said. The two men sat in a shared silence for a time as the puppies circled them, whining softly, their breath forming tiny clouds in the cold. One of them, a small female with dark-socked paws and curious eyes, clambered right into Logan's lap, gently gnawing on his sleeve. He let out a laugh that was half broken by tears, half reborn with life. Frank watched his hands resting on his cane. "He's taken to you fast," he observed. "He's normally careful with strangers. Guess maybe you're not a stranger to him." At that, Logan finally looked up and met his gaze. "I don't know how I can ever thank you," he said. "You saved him." Frank slowly shook his head. "No, son. He saved me. I lost my boy in the Gulf 20 years back. Haven't been much for people since. But dogs, they still know how to talk to me." His voice grew quiet, his gaze fixed on Valor. "Found him near a scrapyard. He was thin as a rail, wouldn't let anyone get near him. It took weeks before he'd take food from my hand. Knew he'd been through hell, and I guess I was right. A profound and unspoken understanding passed between the two men. Two soldiers from different wars shouldering the same kind of ghosts. Across the park, a quiet, mechanical click broke the stillness. Both men turned toward it. Lisa Cooper, bundled up in her gray coat with a camera strap across her shoulder, stood partially hidden behind a snow-covered tree. Her auburn hair seemed to catch the weak sunlight, and her cheeks were flushed a rosy pink from the biting cold. When she saw they were looking, she quickly lowered her camera, her face a mixture of deep embarrassment and quiet fascination. "Sorry," she called out. "I didn't mean to interrupt, It was a beautiful moment." Frank chuckled softly. "You folks with your cameras," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "You caught a good one, I bet." Lisa approached with slow steps, her boots crunching in the snow. Her eyes darted between Logan and his dog. "Is that a service tag?" she asked, pointing toward the collar. I saw it glint in the light." Logan nodded, his voice still thick with held-back emotion. "Military issue. Valor K9 unit deployed overseas." Her expression melted. "You mean, this is your dog?" He managed a faint smile. "He was, but I guess he never really stopped being." Lisa dropped her gaze to the dog, who now sat proudly by Logan's side. His ears perked, his broad chest rising and falling in a calm, steady rhythm. "I work for Portland Life," she said. "We cover local stories pieces on veterans rescue work. Things like that. Would you mind if I wrote about this? It's not every day a story like this happens." Frank shrugged. "It's up to him," he said, nodding toward Logan, who hesitated. "I don't want any attention," he admitted. "But maybe people should know that some stories don't end where we think they do." Lisa nodded slowly, her expression solemn. "I promise I'll be careful," she assured him, lifting her camera to capture one indelible moment. Logan, kneeling in the snow, Valor's head pressed against his heart, the two puppies dancing around them. By afternoon, Lisa found herself in a cafe, crafting the story to the gentle sound of jazz. The headline came to her effortlessly: "A veteran meets his dog again." She smiled, adding the question mark. It gave the headline a gentle touch, a feeling of wonder instead of simple certainty. The opening told of a soldier and a stray, and the winter morning that finally broke a year of silence. That night her story went live. By dawn, it rippled through the quiet corners of Portland's internet, shared across neighborhood forums, veteran support pages, and animal rescue groups. Comments flooded in, "Miracles really do happen. God bless our soldiers. No bond is stronger than this." But Logan was still unaware of it all. He stayed in the park long after Lisa left, long after the fading sun painted the sky in gold. Frank stood beside him in silence. The two men just watched as Valor lay between them, the pups nuzzling his fur. At last, Logan whispered, "Welcome home, buddy." The dog buried its head in his chest, breathing out slowly, and for the first time in so long, Logan let the tears fall. Frank politely looked away, blinking hard. Some things he muttered just don't need any words. Around them, the snow fell endless and forgiving. But by the next morning, the snowfall had finally ceased, leaving the city bathed in a pale light. Portland glistened as a low sun turned every rooftop and branch into a delicate sculpture of glass. The air carried the scent of pine and melting snow, but the ground remained white where the park met the river. Logan Hayes walked there once more, this time with a clear purpose. His steps were slow and deliberate, his boots crunching in the shallow frost as he moved toward the very bench where everything changed just 2 days before. Valor was at his side now, without a leash, without hesitation, moving in a quiet rhythm with Logan's stride. The big German shepherd kept close, his ears twitching slightly, his breath a pale mist in the cold air. Logan glanced down often, still hardly believing this new reality. "You remember this place, don't you, boy?" he murmured. The dog answered with a soft whine, his eyes meeting Logan's with that same steady calm that had anchored him through firefights and nightmares. The puppy's hope and echo, as Logan had begun to call them, trailed behind, tumbling in the snow and nipping at each other's tails. At the bench, Frank Dawson was already waiting, seated with his wooden cane resting on his knees. He raised a gloved hand to greet him. "You made it," he said, a faint grin on his face. Logan just nodded, easing himself down beside the older man. "Had to come back." Frank's face was etched with deep lines that creased like old paper when he smiled. Up close, Logan saw a faint scar slicing across his left cheekbone. An old wound, not deep, but permanent. Frank noticed him looking. "Shrapnel," he said simply. "Vietnam, 1971. It took years before he stopped feeling its phantom presence." Logan gave a quiet nod, a silent acknowledgement of a shared wound. They shared a quiet moment watching the pups play in the snow. Then Frank's voice broke the stillness. "You know, when I found him, I had no idea what he was. Just some stray limping through a scrapyard near Spokane. The rain was coming down in sheets that night. I was heading home from the VA when I spotted him by the fence line. He looked half gone, ribs pushing through his coat, a paw sliced open. I pulled over expecting a fight, but he never even growled. He just looked at me." Frank's voice faded, his gaze lost somewhere far away, like a soul weary of the fight. A faint smile touched Logan's lips as he stroked Valor's fur. "Yeah, that sounds like him," Frank went on. "It was a full week till he'd eat from my hand. 2 more before he'd even crossed the threshold. The first time he barked, I nearly spilled my coffee." A quiet laugh escaped him. "I had no idea he was trained not till a month later. I was chopping wood when a log broke free, rolling toward the road just as a truck barreled down. He let out 2 quick, sharp barks, then yanked me back just before it crushed my leg. I guess his duty never really ended." Logan listened, his gaze fixed on the shimmering ice of the distant frozen river. "So he saved my life, too," Logan said, his voice low. "Different war, but the same heart." Frank turned to face him fully. "What happened?" The question hung between them, heavy and inevitable. Logan drew a ragged breath, his eyes seeing a different time. "Afghanistan, Kandahar. We were on a rescue. A building collapsed from a blast. The ground beneath was a honeycomb of tunnels. Valor pulled 3 survivors out before the second explosion hit. All I recall is dust sound, then darkness. I woke up outside. I was buried waist deep in the rubble. They told me he was gone. I spent 2 days searching that site after they freed me. Not a single trace." Frank's features softened, his knuckles white on the cane. "And somehow, he's here." Logan let out a breath, a fragile smile forming on his lips. "He's here." Valor pressed against him, resting his head on Logan's thigh. The solid warmth was an anchor, a piece of reality. For the first time in what felt like forever, Logan wasn't lost somewhere between then and now. Frank gestured to the puppies. "And them your work," Logan chuckled softly. "You gave him something to live for when I couldn't." A soft laugh escaped Frank. "I guess he returned the favor. It's been years since that house felt like a home." His voice dropped low. "After my son, after he was killed overseas, I'd pretty much given up on second chances. Then this stray appears barking at my door like he was sent to tell me my time wasn't up yet." The weight of his words filled the silence. Logan said nothing, but instead reached over his hand firm on the old man's shoulder. "Thank you," he said, "for keeping him safe." They sat that way for a long time, bound by a silence that spoke volumes. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Margaret Ellis stared into a cup of cooling tea at her kitchen table. A delicate morning light pierced the lace curtains, illuminating the folded newspaper spread out before her. The front page of Portland Life held a photograph, a man kneeling in the snow beside a German shepherd, his head bowed low. The dog's muzzle pressed deeply into his chest. Beneath the caption, "A veteran meets his dog again." Margaret's hands, aged by time, trembled as she touched the image. She knew him, the quiet man from the park. A tide of emotion swelled inside her, something between fierce pride and a tender ache. She rose with deliberate care, drawn to the small wooden chest by the window. Tucked inside, wrapped in a yellowed handkerchief, was a letter she had never shared with a soul. The envelope, addressed in faded blue ink, read, "To my Margaret, In case I don't make it home. Penned by her husband, William Ellis, over 50 years ago. She unfolded the fragile paper, her eyes scanning the words she already knew by heart. If I don't return, promise me you won't close your heart to the world. God sends us reminders of love in the smallest of creatures. Sometimes a bird, sometimes a dog. They keep us grounded when the world goes silent. Promise me you'll never stop looking for those signs. She carefully folded the letter once more, pressing it against her heart. She then wrapped a scarf around her neck, donned her heavy coat, and stepped into the biting cold. Back at the park, Frank had gone for coffee at a nearby stand, leaving Logan alone with Valor. The magnificent dog rested peacefully at his side, his head a comforting weight on Logan's leg, as Hope and Echo slept in a small pile by the bench. Logan stared out at the river, lost in his own breathing when he heard the crunch of footsteps behind him. "Morning, Mr. Hayes," the familiar voice called. He turned. Margaret stood there, her cheeks flushed from the cold, a dusting of snow on her scarf. Her smile was soft, but her eyes held a shimmering, unspoken depth. "Mrs. Ellis," Logan said, rising to his feet. "I didn't expect to see you." "I read the paper," she interrupted gently. "You found him." He simply nodded. "Or maybe he found me." She stepped closer, retrieving something from her coat pocket. "I believe this is for you." She extended the folded letter, her hands shaking almost imperceptibly. "My husband wrote this before he left for the war. I think it was always meant for a soldier like you." Logan accepted the letter, feeling the delicate weight of history in his hands. "Are you sure?" he asked. A faint smile touched her lips. "I've held on to it long enough. It's time it found its way to the right soldier." He settled back onto the bench, unfolding the letter as she watched in silence. The handwriting, though slanted, was undeniably strong. He read in stillness, a tightness gripping his chest, at the profound simplicity of the words. When he looked up, his eyes were glassed with emotion. Margaret gave a single, knowing nod. "Some souls are sent to make sure we don't give up." Valor lifted his head as if he understood, and pressed his nose softly into Logan's hand. Logan managed a faint smile. "Maybe that's exactly what he was sent for." The old woman let out a gentle laugh. "Then you're both doing just fine." She turned and left him. Then, her quiet footsteps fading into the snow-covered path, Logan sat in stillness, reading the letter one more time, while Valor rested at his side, eyes half closed and content. The distant river glimmered, and for the first time in a long while, the world felt whole again. The week that followed dawned under gentler skies. Portland's snow was finally surrendering, revealing patches of brown earth and the raw scent of the thaw. The river stirred to life once more, slowly but surely carrying fractured ice downstream. Logan Hayes found himself at the park earlier than usual that morning, a paper cup of coffee warming his hands. Valor moved beside him with the deliberate calm of a seasoned soldier, alert and watchful, but never rushed. Behind them, two tiny shadows danced through the melting slush, Hope and Echo, pups whose energy seemed boundless. And Frank Dawson was already waiting, bundled in his heavy brown coat cane propped against the bench. His breath came out in misty clouds as he offered a wave. "You're early today," he called. Logan managed a faint smile sitting beside him. "Habit. Used to run drills at this hour. Old habits die slow." Frank chuckled, leaning back. "Ain't that the truth? This one still gets me up at dawn every day." He gestured to Valor, who trotted to the tree line, sniffing the wind. As the dog started playing, Frank's whole expression softened. "You know those two little rascals are his right?" Logan turned, his surprise evident. "Ew!" "His pups." "Yep." Frank nodded. "He met a shepherd over at my neighbor's farm a few months after I found him. They had a litter, 6 in total. Found homes for 4. These two, they stayed. I just couldn't separate them." Logan watched Hope and Echo tumble together in the snow, fur bright against the earth. "You kept the best of them," he said with a smile. "Or they kept me," Frank replied. "Funny how dogs choose us far more than we ever choose them." Logan chuckled quietly. Yeah, they see right into our souls. For a moment they watched in companionable silence. Hope, the smaller of the pair, had a distinct black stripe down her back, and ears that were still too big for her head. She barked with wild joy at every falling leaf. Echo, slightly larger, carried his father's markings and wore a curious, thoughtful expression. He followed Logan's movements constantly, as if he were trying to understand everything the man did. Logan leaned back, the bench creaking beneath him. Hope and Echo, he said, suddenly testing the sound. Frank looked at him, amused. You just name him, yeah? Logan said. Hope because she looks at everything like it's completely new. Echo because he's a reminder of something that never really left. Frank smiled, nodding. Fitting names. Maybe that's what we all need. A little hope and a good echo from the past. They both laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that comes from men who know they've already survived their hardest days. For a time, they simply watched the dogs chase each other through the patches of melting snow as the morning light grew brighter around them. Later that day, Logan and Valor walked near the park's edge. A familiar voice called from behind. Mr. Hayes, wait up! He turned, seeing Lisa Cooper jogging right toward him. Her auburn hair was tied back beneath a knit hat. A camera bounced on her chest. Her cheeks were red from the cold, her eyes shining with excitement. I have been looking everywhere for you, she said, catching her breath. Is something wrong with the story? Logan asked, half smiling. Completely the opposite, she breathed. It's blowing up, Mr. Hayes. We're seeing thousands of shares. People are calling it the Winter Reunion. My editor wants to film a follow-up, something short, but deeply personal. Would you be open to it? Her gaze flickered towards the dog. To share what this all means to you. Logan moved uncomfortably, the idea unsettling him. Cameras were never something he welcomed, but the sincerity in her eyes, and the hope his story might comfort someone else, made him nod. Okay, he agreed, but the focus has to be on him. He bent down fondly, scratching behind Valor's ear. Lisa grinned. Deal? They set the meeting for 2 mornings later. When the day came, the park seemed to glow. Sunlight caught the wet branches and patches of snow shimmered like shattered mirrors on the grass. Lisa got there early, positioning a small tripod close to the bench. She'd traded her heavy city coat for a lighter parka, her hair glowing with hints of copper in the morning light. All right, she said with a warm smile. No script, no pressure. Just be yourself. Frank had come along too, standing close by with a steaming thermos. He observed as Logan crouched down beside Valor and the puppies. Ready for your close-up, soldier? Frank teased, lifting an eyebrow. Not even a little, Logan mumbled, though a small smile touched his lips. Lisa started to film. Her voice was steady, almost reverent. This is Logan Hayes, she began narrating softly. A Navy SEAL who thought his best friend was gone forever until one fateful winter morning changed absolutely everything. While she filmed, Logan played with the dogs, throwing a small stick that Hope chased wildly as Echo hung back, protecting his father. Her camera lens followed, catching small details, the slight wag of Valor's tail just before it stilled, the sound of Logan's laughter unguarded and genuine for what felt like the first time in months. Then, a sudden sharp click from the camera's autofocus shattered the quiet. Echo went rigid, his ears twitching nervously. Another click, and the pup bolted toward the bench, whimpering. Lisa gasped in shock. Oh no, I didn't mean to. But Logan was already in motion. Kneeling beside the terrified pup, his voice was calm and low. Hey, easy there, little guy. You're all right. It was just a sound. Nothing here is going to hurt you. His hand moved slowly, gently, resting on Echo's back, feeling the tremor run through him. Valor, watching from just a few feet away, stood up and calmly walked over, pressing his massive head against Logan's shoulder, a solid, comforting weight. Logan remained perfectly still for a long moment, one hand on Echo, the other resting on Valor. The park's silence seemed to envelop them. Even Lisa behind the camera slowly lowered it, captivated by the silent, powerful beauty of the scene. Frank whispered, "Now that right there, that's what healing looks like if I've ever seen it." Lisa said nothing. She let the camera roll, capturing the image that would soon touch millions. A soldier kneeling in the melting snow, his devoted dog at his side, a frightened puppy cradled between his hands. A simple, perfect circle of trust. After a moment, Logan stood slowly brushing the melting snow from his knees. "I guess he's a little camera shy," he said quietly. Lisa smiled, her eyes shining. "No, he's just honest. Most dogs are." A soft laugh was shared between them. As they packed up, Lisa turned one last time to capture a final frame. The sun cast a warm glow on Logan's shoulder, Valor's head resting trustingly upon him, the two pups tumbling playfully at their feet. It was an image of pure peace, a moment she knew no words could ever improve. That night she reviewed the day's footage in her small apartment. Lisa paused on that single perfect frame. No music, no captions, just a simple title. She typed hope and echo. The morning began in a quiet hush, gray and unassuming, as if the world was still lost in a dream. But by noon, the sky had hardened to iron. Clouds surged over Portland, a slow, colorless tide heavy with intent. A sharp, steady wind rose from the Columbia River, whistling a mournful tune through the bare branches of Riverfront Park. Logan Hayes was at his cabin nestled on the outskirts of town, splitting firewood when the first flakes began to drift down. They fell softly at first, vanishing on his sleeve. Then they grew dense, swirling like ash in a sudden gale. A storm was forecast, but no one predicted this fury. An early winter tempest moving with terrifying speed and force. Frank Dawson was in the park that afternoon, as he so often was with Valor and the two puppies. The dogs sensed it restless, their noses to the ground, their tails sweeping paths through the deepening snow. Frank's breath plumed in the cold, his shoulders hunched deep in his wool coat. At 70, he'd seen worse, but a strange feeling in the air unsettled him. The very air seemed to hum with a warning. Across the field, Lisa Cooper knelt by the playground, her camera ready. She'd hoped to capture the quiet before the snow, a poetic concept her editor adored. But the calm had shattered. Zipping her parka, she looked to Frank. "We need to get back," she called out. "This is getting really bad." Frank nodded, whistling for the dogs. Valor gave one sharp, commanding bark, and the puppies instantly raced toward his side. Frank managed a small smile. "Still the soldier, huh?" he muttered. They pushed on toward the parking lot, but in mere minutes the snow became a blizzard. Visibility plunged, erasing the world around them. An endless white swallowed everything. The trees disappeared, lost to a churning wall of wind and biting ice. Frank could hardly see 5 feet in front of him. At that exact moment, miles away, Logan stood at his window, watching the storm tighten its icy grip on the town. His phone buzzed, a text from Lisa, stuck in park. Visibility 0. "Frank with me. Dogs are scared." His heart seized in his chest. He moved without thinking, grabbing his coat flashlight gloves. He turned to call for Valor, but the powerful shepherd was already at the door, poised and waiting for him, his gaze alert, as if he already understood. "All right, partner," Logan said, his voice low. "Time to bring them home." He drove as far as he dared until the road was completely lost beneath a blanket of white. He left the truck running for warmth, wrapped his scarf tight against the cold, and began the trek on foot with Valor leading the way. The wind sliced like glass, and the snow stung his face, but he pushed onward, tracking the faint outline of the park fence. Every few steps, Valor would stop, nose raised his ears, twitching, deciphering sounds on the wind. Then came a single deep bark, a resonant call that pierced the storm. And Logan listened intently. A faint, high-pitched bark answered from somewhere ahead. It was the puppies. "Duh." "Good boy," Logan said, forcing himself onward. In the park's heart, Frank had collapsed. His leg gave out completely on the frozen, icy path. Lisa fought to help him, but the ground was a sheet of ice. Small and slender, barely 5'5", her dark hair was frozen to her face. Her fingers were completely numb. her camera lost somewhere in the snow. "I can't move him," she cried out against the howling wind. Frank gritted his teeth, his voice laced with agony. "Go get help." "I'm not leaving you," she defiantly shouted back, her eyes wide with terror. Valor had disappeared into the whiteout moments ago, chasing the puppies who had panicked and fled. She prayed for his return. Then, cutting through the roar of the storm, a low bark thundered like a beacon of hope. Valor materialized first, a dark form in the white chaos, followed by Logan, his head bowed. A flashlight beam sliced through the blizzard. Relief struck Lisa so hard she nearly sobbed aloud. "Lisa!" Logan shouted out. "You okay?" She nodded, gesturing toward Frank. "He's hurt. Slipped on the path." Logan knelt beside the fallen man, whispering, "Easy. Frank, I've got you." He checked the leg. There was no fracture, but the knee was swollen. "You can't walk on this. We're carrying you." Frank weakly shook his head. "Leave me if you have to." Logan's glare was like steel. "Not happening." Valor circled them anxiously, his barks aimed at the tree line where faint yips echoed. The puppies were still lost. Logan met his gaze. "Go," he commanded. "Find them." The shepherd paused for a heartbeat, then plunged back into the storm, his figure vanishing into the white abyss. Lisa helped Logan move Frank toward a grove of pines, a meager shelter from the wind. They huddled together as the brutal cold bit at their faces. Minutes felt like hours. Then barking tore through the storm again, louder this time. Valor emerged. Snow was caked on his fur as he carried Hope gently by her scruff. Echo trailed behind him, limping but alive. He gently placed the puppy in Lisa's arms, then looked to Logan, his tail giving a single, tired wag. "Good boy," Logan breathed out, his voice shaking with relief. The way back was far worse. The paths were now gone, erased by snow. Logan supported Frank with one arm, cradling both puppies in his coat for warmth. Valor trotted ahead, his barks a periodic guide, guiding them toward the faint outline of the park gate. Each bark was a beacon in the darkness, slicing through the howling wind. Back in town inside the quiet St. Mary's Chapel, Margaret Ellis was kneeling in the front pew. Candles flickered their soft light, dancing on the marble face of the Virgin Mary, while the storm raged just outside, rattling the old stained glass windows. Margaret clasped her hands, whispering a prayer. "Please, Lord, keep them safe. The soldier and his loyal companion, let them find their way home." Her voice trembled, and for an instant the light seemed to burn brighter, reflecting in her teary eyes. At last a distant siren's cry rose from the edge of town. Logan and the others staggered through the final stretch, half blinded and half frozen. The snow now reached their knees. Frank could barely stand his breath, coming in ragged bursts. "We're close," Logan grunted, his eyes scanning for the gate. Then a dark shape. His truck buried, but its engine still running. "Almost there." Valor barked again, loud and sharp. Then, with a surprising strength, he gently took Frank's coat sleeve in his jaw and started to pull, guiding him forward. Inch by agonizing inch, they reached the truck. Lisa helped Frank in, while Logan wrapped the puppies inside his thick coat. Their tiny forms trembled against his chest, but the warmth of their breath was a promise of life. So real, so grounding. By the time they finally made it back to Logan's cabin, the storm was beginning to fade. Snow still fell softly outside, but the raging wind had calmed to just a whisper. Frank sat by the fire, his leg bandaged, sipping hot tea with trembling hands. Lisa was huddled nearby in a blanket, still pale but with a faint smile. Logan sat on the floor beside Valor, the dog's head resting gently on his shoulder. Inside his coat, Hope and Echo slept curled together. Small embers of life in a world that had nearly frozen solid. He gazed down at them, feeling their warmth seep through the fabric, and something deep inside him finally broke open. Grief and gratitude hit him at once. He whispered, "You brought us home, buddy." Valor pressed closer, his eyes half closed as the crackle of the fire filled the silent cabin. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving only peace, 3 days after the blizzard, the sky over Portland was clear once more. The world beyond Logan's cabin shimmered under the pale gold of morning light, each branch jeweled with melting frost. It was a silence that hummed with what they'd endured, the kind that follows survival. Inside, the aroma of coffee mingled with the soft crackle from the wood stove. Frank sat near the fire, his bandaged leg healing as he idly flipped through the morning newspaper. Valor lay at his feet, his tail sweeping the rug in a lazy rhythm, while Hope and Echo wrestled playfully near the window. Logan stood at the counter stirring his coffee, unaware that life beyond these walls was about to change. Lisa Cooper had uploaded the video late the previous night, a short 5-minute piece she titled, "The Seal and His Dog Who Found Each Again." It was never meant to be a national story. She had kept the editing simple, letting the raw emotion carry the narrative. The clip opened with snowflakes swirling in slow motion as Logan's quiet voice began to speak. "Torn. He didn't save me once. He's been saving me every day since." The camera then lingered on Valor's wise eyes, then on Logan kneeling beside the frightened Echo as the older dog rested his head on the soldier's shoulder. Lisa had added no music, just the sound of the wind dying down and a single heartbeat of silence before fading to black. By sunrise, the video had already amassed hundreds of thousands of views. By noon, millions. When Lisa's phone buzzed nonstop, she thought it was just a glitch. Her inbox was overflowing with interview requests from veterans groups and news stations asking permission to air the story. "Oh my God," she whispered, staring at her screen. Her roommate, a graphic designer named Clara Jennings, poked her head out from the kitchen. Clara was in her late 20s, tall with sharp, defined features, her dark curls haloed by the steam rising from her coffee. "Another sleepless night, wasn't it?" she asked softly. Lisa angled the phone so she could see. "It's gone global. CNN, Fox, even the BBC. They all have it." "Look." Clara's eyes widened in disbelief. "Oh my God, Lisa. This is you. You've brought half the country to tears." Lisa managed a faint, incredulous laugh. "It wasn't me," she whispered. "It was them. The soldier and his dog." She fell silent, her eyes fixed on the endless stream of comments. People were sharing stories of their own lost companions. Veterans were saluting Logan for his service. Strangers were just writing, "Faith in humanity restored." Tears welled in her eyes. "This is so much bigger than I ever imagined." By that afternoon, their story had captured the heart of the nation. The local Portland anchor, her own voice choked with emotion, introduced the clip. In a story that is bringing millions of Americans together, a former Navy SEAL and his canine partner have been miraculously reunited after a year of separation. Back in the quiet solitude of the cabin, it was Frank who saw it first. "Hey, Logan," he called out, peering at the television screen. "You should probably come see this." Logan turned from the window, a slight frown creasing his brow. And there on the screen was his own face, weathered and private, a man clearly unaccustomed to the spotlight. The footage rolled him on his knees, Valor pressing in close, a bond unbroken, the snow falling around them like a quiet blessing. The cabin grew still. Frank let out a low chuckle. "Well, I'll be. Guess you're famous now, son." "I never asked for any of this," Logan murmured, rubbing the back of his neck. Valor lifted his head, sensing his partner's disquiet. The phone rang moments later. It was Lisa, her voice a breathless rush over the line. "Logan, I am so sorry. It's gone viral. They're calling it the story America needed to see. There's nothing we can do to stop it now." He didn't sound angry, just stunned into silence. "It's all right," he finally said after a long moment. "If this helps even one person believe in something good again, then maybe it's worth it." Just then, the mail truck rumbled to a stop at the gate. Frank ambled to the door, returning with a stack of envelopes. "Nah, looks like you've got some mail, son." By nightfall, Logan was sitting in a sea of letters. Some were neatly typed, others scrawled in hurried handwriting, but every single one poured out with raw emotion. "You taught me how to forgive again." "My son was a soldier too. Thank you for your service. I watched with my children. We all cried. Tucked among them was a letter from a veterans charity reporting that donations had surged